Alright, hey, what's up guys? I'm Alex, this is Alex Plays, and today I want to talk to you about The Division and exotic gear. Now, I'll try to keep this from being a full-on rant, but it's going to be a little hard since for hardcore Division agents like me, this is a subject of real frustration. Even if you're not 1,000 hours plus into the game, this video should be useful to you as a new player since I'll break down a little how exotics work, what I think the problems are, and just what you're getting yourself involved in. Alright, let me say right off the bat, I'm not just making this video to pour salt on the devs. I legitimately do care, and I do want to see the game thrive, and would like to help if I can with some constructive criticism. Okay, so let's jump right into it. For those who are new to the concept of exotics, they are high-end weapons or gear that drop only in specific circumstances or activities, legendary incursions, weekly assignments, etc. Their purpose is to reward players with distinct and specific advantages, which factor into several of the PvP metas. Let's use a simple example, Skull Gloves. Now these add 16% weapon damage when you have no gear set bonuses activated, 2-piece, 3-piece, 4-piece bonuses. This is the linchpin of the high-end exotic build or all gold meta we currently find in the game. If you take a look at the differences in damage compared to my next best pair of gloves, Savage Gloves in this case, you can see clearly what a huge difference in damage output there is, making these a necessary piece of equipment for PvP. Now I know there's a lot of debate over what is the best PvP gear set, but after talking to a lot of other hardcore agents, the gold meta still seems to be the set of choice, even when other sets, Predator's Mark, Striker in particular, are still viable for PvP. The addition of new gear, or changes to gear score, the devs do this from time to time to refresh the game and give players something to strive for. That can be a little bit annoying to have to regrind for all your gear, but you deal with it. I think they're kind of getting to the end of that road where they're not really going to be able to do that anymore without, the people who have been here since day one being like, oh my god, you're serious? I have to replace all of my gear again? You gotta be joking. But still, it's understandable since these changes are relatively easy to make for the devs and they inject some change into the community and shake things up, keep things alive. Where the devs run into trouble, though, is a clear release first and fix later mentality. In their most recent State of the Game stream, they even admitted as much, saying they valued the, quote, data and, quote, feedback they get from the community.
If you run Alpha Bridge, try strikers, right? Try things you never play, and rotate, right? And get really in deep with the things that maybe aren't the most powerful, so we can get feedback and data on all those things, because that will help us tune everything.
So essentially we're all unsalaried beta testers for them. Just let that sink in for a minute. This explains a lot when it comes to newer patches or even DLC content, which comes out as particularly flawed and buggy, and then they give the same old speech about how they love the community and they love getting our feedback and so on and so on. It's getting a little old at this point, guys. I mean, just look at Underground or Survival, which, in my opinion, could have benefited from way more play testing to iron out some of the problems. I don't think anybody in the community really even plays those modes anymore. The Last Stand, I fear, is going to lose its luster after a bit, since right now it's all Deadeyes and Secret Minds. So this brings us to the problem of exotics. I don't think they bothered to test these out to see if they were actually worthwhile for players to have. And yeah, I know they've got the PTS, but I mean, come on, a few weeks isn't really enough time to see what kind of long-term changes are going to take hold. I can remember when the Barrett's chest came out, and it was a mad rush to get that thing, just because it gave players such a huge edge in PvP. I have friends who played the Lexington mission like 500 times or more just to get one. The problem, as I see it, is twofold. One, the majority of exotics are bad and serve almost no purpose to the ultimate goal of the game, which is PvP. Now, the devs might say, oh no man, you got it all wrong, like PvP isn't the end game, you can still sign on and play PvE and have a blast. Yeah, no man, I gotta call you out on that one. If all you play is PvE, then honestly, what are you even doing in the Division? Every structure, from missions to loot to squads to weapons to gear, has you all on a collision course with PvP. It's unavoidable. The PvE elements of the game are, frankly, the pretense at best. I mean, let's be honest. So the second problem I see here is the overpopulated loot pool and extremely low drop chance for some of the best gear. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten just straight garbage out of caches or from bosses. The last several exotic caches I've opened have been purely awful, and I've even made a few reaction videos to those already. Whether it's a pistol you don't want, or a holster that can only really be useful in the most specific circumstances, it's beyond frustrating, and frankly, it's game-breaking to grind endlessly just to get nowhere. So I recently started playing Destiny, and I have to say their system is much better. Every mission and activity has you increasing in the little steps. I'm sure once you get to the higher end of the spectrum, it can be a little tougher to come by higher end loot, but it seems to me, on the surface, to be a much more orderly system where more often than not, you'll get something that will help you. In The Division, not so much. I mean, let's just take a look at some of these exotics and what they do. The Bullfrog. Damage is increased by 15%. Accuracy and stability mods reduce this bonus. Now, this might be viable for a striker build, but just since you get the extra stability, you might actually be able to hit something with it. But for all of the other builds, it's not great. 9 times out of 10, you see people using the lightweight M4 or the LOVAC. The Caduceus. Each critical hit heals you and your group for 1% of your skill power. Can only heal each player once every 0.20 seconds. This is never used. I've never seen it used, even in PvE, just for the simple fact that it isn't really a net positive. In the end, it makes you less effective, not more. So why is it in the highest loot pool? The list goes on and on. The Tenebrae, the Midas, the Cassidy, the Liberator, the Damascus, the Colonel Bliss holster, etc., etc., etc. And all of them, in my opinion, wet garbage. At the very tippy top of what people want is the Urban MDR, the Barrett's chest piece, short bow knee pads, and skull gloves. Now the drop rates for any exotics is, I think, less than 1% of 1%. So it's way down there. And while it may give younger players something to strive for, the older players are being forced to spend inordinate amounts of time trying to hunt this equipment down just to get back to the PvP they love. We're really getting into the weeds here, but stick with me. The problem within the problem is that the drop rate is so low and the loot pool so overpopulated with bad gear that your chances for getting top tier of what you actually want and need to be competitive in PvP are almost zero. Factor in that you could get a bad roll on a piece of gear or a gun that has the wrong talents, or even one of these garbage guns we've been talking about, you get a Damascus or something. That makes the odds of you getting what you actually want, that big upgrade you're after, even lower. This makes us waste incredible amounts of time doing things we don't want to in order to unlock the best experience in the game. Fully optimized gear to use in PvP. The amount of time I spend doing weekly assignments and incursions and missions is wasted when all I want to do is PvP. And I'm not alone. I know the majority of players tend to PvP, and any assertion otherwise is a deflection from the actual problem. I'm saying this to you devs, and God, I hope you're listening. You will kill this game if you keep going down this path. The solution I'm proposing is simple. Either take exotics out of the game, or increase the drop rate chance so hardcore players can get what they need and get back to the Dark Zone. I mean, I would even pay actual money for an Urban MDR at this point. I've heard it's so good. I raised some of these concerns on Twitter to one of their community developers, and he was, well, less than kind. I don't think he knew I was like a hardcore player or anything. I've got like 1,100 hours into the game, and I'm sure he didn't mean to come off as dismissive. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but I just don't find it particularly helpful to tell a member of your most dedicated community that their concerns aren't valid. Telling us that a piece of gear isn't worth obsessing over is deliberate double talk. You know as well as I do, this poorly structured loot system is not any different from casino gambling. Every time you open a cache, it's the same thing as pulling the lever on a slot machine. The response that they make it rain gear on players is cold comfort for hardcore agents, since 1, we already have most of the stuff we need, 2, most of the gear is low-level drops, and 3, the common loot system has the same exact problem, as you still have LMGs, burstfire ARs, and rhinos in the mix, as well as the rest of the floatsome and jetsam gear that only exist to make the uncommon gear that much more uncommon. You need to fix this, devs. You can't deny it any longer. The system is broken. I'd recommend you change loot drops for higher end players so that we're not constantly rained on by LMGs, astute gloves, rhinos, whatever else, whatever random trash we happen to pick up 90% of the time. Top tier players should get only top tier loot drops so we can get back to PvP. You could also let us earmark specific pieces of gear. You've tried to do this with incursions and the upcoming world events, but that won't fix the problem for higher end players. We'll still get redundant or poorly rolled gear that won't improve our builds. The only solution I can think of is upping the drop rate for higher level players and letting us pursue specific pieces of gear that we're after to complete sets. I'll happily run a mission 10 times. If on the 10th time, I'm guaranteed to get the knee pads or the chest piece I need for a specific set. Just let us click a button and say, hey, game, I want this piece of gear. And then we'll run the missions. We'll do it. We're fine. We'll run the maze. That way we can just get back to PvP and the Division world can keep right on rolling along. I think you're alienating the community. I'm pretty close to leaving the Division myself, because what's really in it for me at this point? Why should I keep grinding for an urban MDR when by the time I get it, it'll probably be nerfed? Look, you have a lot of problems. I get it. I completely understand. It's a lot of work that needs to be done, but you've got to take your heads out of the sand at least a little bit and stop saying it's a live game like that's any kind of good excuse. I had a lot of respect for you guys when you promised to fix the problems in 1.3. You basically admitted your game was broken. That took a lot of guts to get up and say that, and that you were going to do something about it. But now, today, it's getting to the point where it's all starting to sound like lip service, and that legitimate criticism from your fans is not being taken to heart. Alright, I think that'll just about do it. I hope you enjoyed our little talk. Please let me know if you think I'm completely full of it in the comments below. And of course, check me out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can find links to those in the description below. And stay tuned for more. Alright, happy hunting, agents.
Again,
Absolutely.
I still am a fan of the electronics builds. I'm still a fan of letting people play the way they want to play.
Yeah.
This isn't a game just about guns.
Isn't a game just about guns. Just about guns. Just about guns.